This sort of nicely segues us into another topic, which I think kind of branches into this. And it's a video I just recorded for Apple Circle, which is kind of a two-parter. One is that, now with Jony Ive officially stepping away from Apple in any official capacity with his consulting firm, there's a lot of questions. Really, it's a very interesting take. We can talk about it on whether Apple is better with Jony Ive gone or not. But also, there is the understanding of, Tim Cook's new leadership and kind of his continued leadership, not only, I think, caused the fall of Jony Ive, but also has changed Apple in a lot of ways. And we've talked about this before, but there's a lot of concern, I think rightfully so, that Apple is involved in so many different things that they're missing out on some of their main products and ways to improve it. And in some cases, some lines have gotten better than ever. I think the Mac line is better than it's ever been before. But when you look at the iPad Pro, like we were just talking about, I feel like there's some issues there, whether that's a resources issue, I don't know what it is, but I pulled the stats. Let me see if I can pull this up, because I had a line for the Apple Circle video on some of the stuff. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly here live. It was, if I can go to the right script, I just wanted to do something with numbers, so I did this. Apple has got, so I made the point here, there are 4 different iPad models. There's the Air, the Mini, the base one, and the Pro. There's 5 different iPhones, the SE, then the 4 main ones. There's 7 different Mac models. And then there's Arcade, there's News Plus, Fitness Plus, TV Plus, Apple Credit Card, AirPods, AirPods Pro, AirPods Max, 2nd Gen, 3rd Gen, Apple TV 4K, Apple Watch Series 3, 4. It's like, I understand there are like 2 things here. One is Tim Cook is trying to maximize his profits by giving people different options to suit their lifestyle and their budget, which is a great thing. I mean, I think that that's making things more accessible for everybody. But also, Apple is involved in so many different things that maybe some of their products are suffering because they're not getting the attention they deserve.
Yeah, that's kind of always the worry, because, I mean, this is a famous story, but back in the 90s, in 97, when Steve Jobs came back, I mean, that was the issue then. Apple was doing so many things, and they all pretty much sucked. And so, famously, Steve Jobs came back. He cut pretty much every product line, and they did the, what do they call it? Like, I think there was a specific name for it, but it was basically the 4 squares. There was a pro desktop and laptop, and there was a consumer desktop and laptop, and that's all they did. So they had the iMac, then they had, what did they call it? It wasn't the Mac Pro, but it was like the PowerPC G5 or whatever. Power Mac, that's what it was. Then they had the iBook and the what's the professional one before the MacBook Pro?
PowerBook. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what they had. That's all they worked on. And I mean, it's hard to argue that strategy didn't work, because the products, they could focus on what they were actually going to sell. They focused on it, and the products were excellent. I mean, there's no doubt, if you look at what they were selling in, like, say 96, and then look at what they were selling after the iMac G3 and the iBook, the 1st gen, came out, that those were radically different products, and Apple was thinking about it. They intentionally chose to make those products different and unique and a new direction for the company. And I mean, you could still see that DNA today in what we have, but I guess the difference today is that instead of Apple having a million products that all are mediocre, they have a million products that are all actually really good. So it's like, is it a problem? Is it? I don't know, but I could see it slipping back very quickly with a few wrong steps.
It's tough because I understand why Apple does this, because in a way, in order to be viable and to survive and have this, to please the shareholders, they have to bring in money. And obviously we have a economy, and especially in the tech space, it's shifting to subscriptions and these recurring payments. And that's what Apple has to do. And with iPhone sales slumping, because we had, year after year, iPhone sales better than ever, then obviously you hit this peak where everybody's got iPhones. So they've got to look at other product categories. That I understand. But there are still some that are critical of, like, does Apple really need to be in the finance world with the Apple credit card and the buy now, pay later? is Apple Arcade really providing any value? Which I still haven't heard any. I haven't heard much good about News Plus or Arcade. I still am so curious to see how those are actually doing behind the scenes. Apple TV Plus, we've talked about before, has sort of a mixed track record, but it's getting better. Apple's got a lot of irons in the fire, which is a good thing. And like you said, I wouldn't say there's anything bad particularly. Like there's like not one bad thing. It's just that maybe they're like doing enough to keep everything afloat, but nothing is excelling as much as it could. I wonder if Apple like took away all their subscription services and there wasn't, 50 million different models of different things, if they could focus in on the iPhone and maybe they just made two models, would we have a better iPhone because of that? I don't know. And maybe iPhone and even Apple wouldn't be as successful if they did that, but just something to sort of think about, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like if, let's just say they had the iPad, they had like two models of the iPad, they had two models of the iPhone. So instead of the iPhone team working on, the SE, the 13, the 14, probably the 15 as well, they would all be focused on two models. So, or I guess maybe, half of them would be focused on the next two, and then half of that team would be focused on the two after that. So like the 15, for instance. So if they had all that mind power on two phones instead of like 8 phones, I can only imagine that it would be better, right? Like, because I guess we always hear these stories about how there's these cool ideas that are always like floating around. Like for instance, last year it was the the satellite communications that was going to be built into the iPhone, supposedly, so that if you're off grid. By the way, speaking of that feature, I just thought of this. I think that is actually coming to the 14, and here's my reasoning. Because in the iOS 16 beta, if you don't have Signal, which I've been without Signal for a lot of the past month, just because I've been traveling and stuff, instead of saying no service, it actually says SOS. So the idea is that you would actually have a way to reach emergency contacts. But if I have no signal, like there's no service, how am I going to do that? I think it's coming. That's my little
no, there's a little tidbit I haven't heard before. So there you go, Apple Circle podcast exclusive.
Yeah, so that's a little tangent there, but I just wanted to get that out. But yeah, so if they were working on or what I was saying is, we got rumors for that kind of feature, and then it's like, well, it just didn't make it this year, or we didn't have enough supplies, or like, it'll be in the next phone. But it's like, if they were focusing everything on this phone, maybe it would be able to be possible. More minds, more resources. Maybe it's possible. I don't know. Or maybe it's not. Maybe Apple is doing everything perfectly right, and this is just how it has to be. But I don't know.
Or maybe it's just, if they found that like this is like the gear they can be at to make most people happy. So they're making pretty good stuff. They're making a ton of money. Like this is where it needs to be, because I guess there's an argument to be made that, hey, we're just going to focus on these two higher end phones. They're going to be at least $1,000, which is great. But then you're segmenting a lot of people off from Apple, and Apple wouldn't be the company it was because there wouldn't be as many customers because they're so expensive. I get that too. So it's hard to shift the blame entirely on that. Another sort of interesting thing, though, is the departure of Jony Ive. And what's funny about this is that, when this was first announced back in 2019, a lot of people were really nervous about what a post-Jony Ive Apple would look like. This is a guy who worked hand in hand with Steve Jobs to make some of the most defining products of all time, not only in the tech space, but like in the world. iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, AirPods, iPod. So many great things came from, Jony Ive designs. And there was a little worry about what Apple would be like without him. I feel like now, 3 years later in 2022, it almost like it's a blip on the radar, and people are like, oh, that's sad to see. It's a little bit of an end of era, but no one's really concerned because Apple seems to be just fine without him.
Yeah, not only that, but like excelling. Because, when you were talking about that, I was thinking like, we're complaining about something that's not really here yet, right? Like the possibility that they're making too many things that aren't good enough. And I guess the reason that's a worry is because when Jony Ive was here, they definitely were going down that path. They didn't have quite as many products as they do now, but the products were suffering in a way. And I guess you could say that's because of Jony Ive. Famously, we moved from a bunch of ports to no ports with a touch bar. We also had one USB-C with no MagSafe in the 12-inch MacBook so that we can have the thinnest computer possible, which in today's world, like I'd actually like to see that come back. But back then, that did not need to come out at that point, and it's for a lot of people, it seemed like a failure of a product. And just the general trope that Apple is focused on making things thinner and lighter and form over function, that was happening, and people were feeling it, especially in the Mac line. But now that Jony has gone, I mean, they turned the corner on that. So I guess the worry is, it's possible that they will go down that path again, even though they're not necessarily doing it right now. But yeah, they really turned it around. The Mac line right now is really killing it. The iPhones are killing it. Whether or not they're boring, I mean, that's up to you. But in terms of what they are, you can't say that what Apple has released in the last year is bad. I think that's what you can say. Hey, you made it to the end of this Apple Circle podcast clip, but there is a full episode. So if you want to listen to that, click the video over here. You can watch the entire thing. Or if you're someone who just wants to listen in your headphones, we have the audio version. Of course, links for that, where you can subscribe and listen in your favorite audio podcast player, is down below. And last but not least, the Apple Circle channel, where we have mini videos covering everything Apple, is also linked down below. So be sure to check that out and get subscribed.